Yeah, hi. Stan, I'm Isabella. I'm moderating the session, but we still have some more minutes, so we're waiting for some more people to arrive.
Well, but we can start by telling you how grateful we are that we're allowed to translate those books which I've read when they came out first. And it's been quite some time since the first edition, and it was a dream of mine to have them translated. And even back then, Barbara, your translator, and me talked about that at another publisher, which obviously didn't work out. And so we're very proud and very happy to be able to bring the Science in the Cabal trilogy to Germany, finally.
And I'll take the chance to tell you that I'm very glad to see you in person for the first time after all those emails we've exchanged about your books and my translation. It's very nice to meet you at last.
Thanks, it's good to see you. And thanks for the work.
Yeah, I think we're all very happy and excited. Yeah, we have 1 to 2 more minutes, waiting for some more people to arrive. What's the weather like in California? Here it's pretty humid and hot.
Yeah, I've read about that. Here, it's a mild part of a California summer. It will be hot later today, but it was cool in the morning. And I go out to my garden while it's still in the shade in the morning when it's cool. I guess I'll miss that this morning. Then it heats up. It's a Mediterranean climate, but it's the back end of a Mediterranean climate. It's more like a desert, hotter than Mediterranean climate in the summers. So it's a dry heat. That's the thing to add. It's like a desert. It's pretty tolerable. One gets used to it.
Well, you are wearing a sweater.
Yeah, I will try. Let me think. It's in Celsius, it's about 20 degrees, and it'll get up to 30 or 35 later in the day.
Yeah, we are all here in shirts, as you see.
Yeah. Well, I've been reading in the papers. I mean, it sounds like it's been an extraordinary heat wave.
Yeah. And people keep telling you, certain kind of people, that, oh, well, it's been hot before.
Yeah, I think we're right into the topic, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's past, and now we can officially start the panel on Green Earth in conversation with Kim Stanley Robinson. And yeah, naturally, we're going to talk about the Green Earth trilogy, which is currently being translated into German. But we will also talk about topics more broadly. And yeah, I mean, I think I don't have actually to introduce Kim Stanley Robinson, who is right here with us, but I will do very, very briefly. I mean, Stan, you are one of the most influential contemporary science fiction authors, best known for your deeply researched and politically engaged visions of climate and planetary futures. And your work, I mean, including a lot like the Green Earth trilogy, the Mars trilogy, the more recent Ministry for the Future, and many, many more. Your work explores how societies might respond to ecological and technological transformation. So, Stan, we greet you with a big good morning from Berlin to California. Big applause. Yeah, I mean, here it's already evening and we had already a full day of convention. So how did you start your day? You just told us that in the morning you go to your garden. Okay. Have you written anything already?
I haven't written anything for 7 years. That's not quite true. But I did, like everybody else, I did my morning email, mostly just throwing things in the trash and then answering business as I have to. I'm a terrible secretary to myself, but I have to do it because no one else can do it, because there's a level of decisions that isn't just secretarial. So about an hour every morning doing email, and then off to the garden for an hour, and then running frisbee golf for an hour, and then I should be writing my novels. But things like this have intervened.
Okay, then you really got up early, I guess. Wow. So yeah, and we see the connection works perfectly. So technical stuff is super fine. And as you hear and stand on your screen, as you can see, we have 3 more wonderful people on our panel, which I would like to introduce to you right now. I start in the middle with Hannes Riffel. You are an award-winning publisher. You got an award for the ambitious program of the Carcosa Verlag, Carcosa Publishing House, and you're really committed to German science fiction. So tell us, what is your connection or your relation to the work of Kim Stanley Robinson? What does it mean to you personally? And yeah, why did you choose to publish Grüne Erde in German? Why German? Why was this important for you?
Well, you do know he's listening. Well, let me just say, it was probably not very original, but I discovered Stan's work through the Mars trilogy. And I just couldn't believe that anyone was capable of writing such a, well, let's treat it as one book, such a huge novel, which is pitch perfect in terms of science, in terms of landscape description, in terms of how society works, how people interact. And it was one of those books. Another one was earlier, The Dispossessed by Ursula Le Guin, where I think, okay, this one's going to change my life. This is going to change how I think about the world, not as much like a lightning strike as The Dispossessed, but more like this is something I'm going to think about for a long time. And of course, it got me to go back and read all the stuff written by Stan Robinson earlier. We even translated one of your stories. You were making histories in the late 90s for Alien Contact magazines, where we had some alien contact per email. And I just kept reading. And there are still some books out there. My favorite Stan Robinson book hasn't been translated yet. The Years of Rice and Salt, an incredible alternate history novel. So we're trying to sometimes in the future find the money for that and make it happen, because it's another game changer. So I'm just incredibly proud to be able to bring something like the Science in the Capital trilogy, which we called Grüne Erde, because we translated the bit shorter collected edition, and well, there was no going back from that.
Great. I think Stan is very also thankful to hear that in the morning, right?
Yes.
So next I come to Barbara Slawig. Hello, nice to have you here. You are the translator of the Grüne Erde trilogy, as I call it now. But you're also a speculative fiction writer yourself, which I think is also very interesting. And yeah, to you, quite similar question. What the work of Kim Stanley Robinson means to you personally, and how come that you translate now the books? This is quite a thing.
Well, at the moment, it means a lot of work, which I enjoy very, very much, because when you translate a novel, you dive into the text, the story, you live inside for a long time, and it's wonderful because it's so full of detail and it's so vivid, and it's in Grüne Erde, it's a very interesting mix, I think, between realism, a story about today, and vision about the future. And well, to come back to your question, why I started translating it, because Hannes talked me into it, of course. We talked about it, I think, 20 years ago,
Yes.
for the first time, when there wasn't the abridged version, but that never happened. And then, well, I translated all kinds of other stuff, and then I stopped translating, and then Hannes, we've known each other for a very long time from Berlin, and then Hannes asked me to translate a very small, short novel from Rebecca Campbell. It's 150 pages or something like that. And I said, oh, yes, that's nice, I'll do that. And then when I was finished, Hannes asked me, oh, and there's Grüne Earth from Stanley Robinson. It's a bit longer. How about that? And then I read it, and I said, okay, I like to do that.
I can be persistent.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a good trick, I guess. And yeah, we have also Bettina Wurche, very welcome. You are a studied biologist, a science journalist with a focus on climate change and the oceans, and you're also a climate fiction expert, I'd say. So also kind of the same question to you, what role does Kim Stanley Robinson play in your work? What are the linkages? What fascinates you?
I began late with your work, Stan. I read also Mars trilogy for the first time, and I think Hannes said everything, and he was absolutely right. It was changing. You have a very special way to write. I only can admire this. I am not such a writer, and I am a non-fiction writer. So for me, for me, it is interesting how you describe landscapes and how you describe and let us feel how people move in a landscape. If it is a large spaceship or a Mars landscape, or if it's Antarctic. I love your novel Antarctica. It's my most beloved book because I was also in Antarctica. And when I read this novel from Stan, I could see the glittering of the sun on the snow and the ice and the ocean. And this is really something special in your writing. You let us see and feel, and I have the feeling I can hear and sniff, and you don't tell it as a narrator, but you let us live it with the people who are in these landscapes. And that's something I really love. And New York 2140 is one excellent book for me because I'm also from a harbor city and I know exactly what happens when there are floods. And I think you describe it in a way how people adapt at their aquatic, more and more aquatic city part, Manhattan, which goes under 14 meters of water, and they go by boat to work and they live with this environment. And I think this is really good stuff. Thank you for that.
So Stan, if you should be, in a bad mood at one day, just listen to this video, then you feel
Yes.
better. So yeah, I mean, bringing you back into the discussion. So what I think is also very striking, I mean, I'm a political scientist myself, is that your novels are not really utopias, they hold a lot of conflict and negotiation and collective struggle, but they are still in a way optimistic, and I really like the term anti-dystopias in that context. And what I think is very interesting, because in 2015 you revised the book of the Grüne Earth trilogy that were published between 2004 and 2007, so roundabout after 10 years, and now it's actually another 10 years. So with the knowledge of today, have you thought about another update or revision of the book, to make it more optimistic or anti-dystopian or whatsoever?
Oh, no, I would never do that again. that was a one-time thing and kind of a coincidence. I'm very grateful to my English editor, Jane Johnson, because after I finished the trilogy, I felt like I had made some mistakes in the original conception for that trilogy that made it awkward and overlong. And I asked her if we could publish it in one volume so at least people would see that it was a single long novel. And she said, I'll do it if you cut it to a length that can be fitted into one book. And so I cut it by about 15% for practical reasons so that it could fit into one volume, which is published by Harper Voyager, and then by Bantam, following Jane Johnson's lead. She made the Americans go along with it. And I was glad to have it in one volume, and I was also glad to cut it by 15% because when I first wrote the book, I thought it was kind of a funny joke to describe Washington, D.C. as it operates right now, as if it were an alien setting and needed to have extra explanations of how things worked, as in a science fiction novel. So that wasn't that funny, and everybody knew a lot of the things I was describing at great length, and so the joke was overextended, you might say, and didn't work in the first place. So when I compressed it, I realized that I was making it better, that I probably should have done that the first time around. And it got into the one volume. I think it went, if you counted pages, it went from like 1,400 pages to 1,000 pages. So it's pretty significant, maybe a 20% cut. I'm not sure about the numbers there. As Barbara can testify, my accuracy when it comes to numbers, some of the numbers in Green Earth are still quite crazily wrong. I can't account for it. I thought I got them right the first time. I never had good technical editors at Bantam or in England. And so there's a lot of mistakes that will be cleaned up in the German version, or at least dropped so that they don't exist at all there. And I guess the last thing I would add is that I like Green Earth quite a lot now as a novel about Washington, D.C. in the early 21st century, how it works and how the National Science Foundation works, how important they are, how scientists work in a federal context as technocrats, you would say. And I like it. Also, this notion of the Gulf Stream stalling, which is the way it was talked about then. Now we talk about the AMOC, the Atlantic Meridian Overturning Current. Perhaps that's what it stands for. Around 2000, it was discovered that probably the Gulf Stream stall was what caused the Younger Dryas, and probably enormous amounts of fresh cold water poured off of the melting ice cap of around the North Pole at the end of the last ice age. And it poured out in these gigantic outbursts floods, almost like happened on Mars a billion years before. And that this stalled the Gulf Stream and caused the climate of the whole Earth to go from warm and wet to cold and dry in 3 years. And so this made a great science fiction story. It was climate fiction, one of the earliest climate fictions, I think, maybe, except for, of course, the constant stream of planetary climate change that goes through science fiction all the way back to the beginning. Jules Verne is good on this. And so since I finished Green Earth, and this was about 2006, the whole idea that the Gulf Stream could stall has been put in doubt because that was an awful lot of cold, fresh water pouring off the ice cap, and there's no equivalent. Greenland won't melt fast enough, etc. So it looked like it wasn't really a present danger, and that I had accidentally written a kind of an alternative history of climate fiction. But, however, recently, suddenly the AMOC is weakening in ways that are not truly fully explained, and it might happen that the book becomes more realistic than it was, which is strange and actually kind of frightening, because you don't want the Gulf Stream to stall, you don't want the AMOC to stall. Europe that then suddenly has a climate like the Yukon territories or something, immensely colder, because it's an enormous amount of heat that gets taken north up the Atlantic by the Gulf Stream and gets dumped essentially on Europe and creates the climate that you have there. So the fact that Green Earth is becoming relevant again in that technical sense is actually not that fortunate of a thing. But at least it can sharpen the minds of readers. Maybe it gives the book back an edge that it had lost for the 20 years between publication and now.
Thank you. I think Barbara has a question actually, which is very fitting right now. I mean, because you're fascinated how you stand right about mega events, right? So you would like to know more about it.
Yes, this may be a writer's question, but no matter. One of the things I really enjoy in your book is how you describe, how you tell about those major events like the flooding of Washington D.C., for example, or the storms on the West Coast, or in Volume 2, the cold snap, of course. And I've been really wondering how you go about writing about things like that. If you start like with the flooding of Washington, if you started with a real life, real world event, and so to speak, enlarged it, or if you just start from imagining this flooding, and then I don't know, look at the science and at the geography and so to say grounded in the real world. What's the starting point for you?
Well, thank you for that, Barbara. And I would say the starting point comes from a literary problem. How do you write in a novel with characters climate change, which, especially when I was writing Green Earth, was regarded as something that was going to happen over a century and would be slow. So this is a term out of political science, slow violence versus fast violence. So if there's a systemic system that is committing violence against an underprivileged population, post-colonial or whatever, then it's a good phrase to keep in mind that there is such a thing as slow violence, and we live in it in this world, for sure. But then narrating that in a novel is hard. The boiling frog problem, the way it always seems the same until suddenly it's different, that's hard to convey. On the other hand, occasionally there's breakpoints. There's some kind of emergent phenomenon, and the slow violence turns into fast violence. And it's easier to narrate that because you're in an emergency and you can write an action scene in effect. So I look for those, and it's not hard to find them. And now, of course, 20 years later, we've seen this all over the world. The sudden flood that you didn't think would happen that wipes out. That village in Switzerland near the Luschenthal that was wiped out in a day. And they had warnings so that hardly anybody was killed because they got out of town before it was crushed and is gone forever. The Palisades fire in Los Angeles, Altadena also. Two big neighborhoods of Los Angeles, which, as you know, is a coastal plain that's really about 50 towns all melted into one. Two of those towns burned down in a single day and are still wrecked. It keeps happening, and it's now a kind of drumbeat, so that every month in these years, and now with El Nino, maybe a really big El Nino coming this winter, it will happen more this year too, because each year is hotter than the one before, although it varies a tiny bit because of the El Nino variations. But this will be bad, and so it's not only just easier to narrate, it's also become more realistic. There are going to be, I would say that, I'll end by saying this, you never think it'll happen to you until suddenly you are surprised to find yourself in it. So maybe this super heat dome over Europe is one of these surprises for you all, but everywhere on Earth, people are being surprised and saying, oh, I didn't think it would happen to me, now it's going to happen to me. So Hannes mentioned the climate deniers amongst us. Well, these are just stubborn people. They know just as well as anybody else that we're in climate change and that it's bad for us, but they don't like to admit it for political reasons. So they have to be overwhelmed in the political arena so that we can react appropriately. But in the meantime, the choices I made for writing Green Earth, the catastrophes, the flooding of Washington, which could happen, I had the flooding of Los Angeles in Ministry for the Future. I'll keep coming back to these because not only are they easier for the novelist and more exciting for the reader, but they're also more realistic to the way things are happening now.
Thank you. I mean, we'll be coming back to the topic of politics in a minute, but before, also Hannes, you have also a question about writing more in general, right?
I was wondering, I mean, you've been a writer for quite a while now, and so your decision process, what will be your next book, what you will be able to take on will have changed in terms of, I mean, we all do when we're not 30 anymore, and we decide, no, I'm not going to read another 5,000 books, probably more like 500. And for a writer, it's you always written huge books. Books that have taken years. And do you still look forward and say, okay, I'm going to write this? And how do you decide what you're going to spend your time on? And this may give you a chance to just hint at the book that's going to be published by the end of the year.
Yeah, sure. And thank you for that. Well, when I was young, I had a lot of ideas. Not as many ideas as most of my science fiction comrades. The science fiction field has some writers where ideas are like a Roman candle. They're just pouring out of them, and they only need to catch one or two of the flow of ideas. Terry Bisson, Alastair Reynolds, Adam Roberts. The list could be hugely extended of writers who seem to have ideas flying off them like sparks. For me, not that way, but I always had a treasured few ideas like in a hopper up in my head. And as I finished one novel, it was obvious to me which one was next ready to go. And Hannes mentioned The Years of Rice and Salt. That one was ready in my mind for at least 20 years before I wrote it because I wasn't ready and there were others that were ready. By the time I finished Ministry for the Future, which was 2019, I was out of ideas. And so it was a perfect time to take a rest, and I was out of contract also. And I wanted to write a book about the Sierra Nevada, where I've spent about 2 years of my life backpacking. So I wrote a nonfiction book about the Sierra Nevada, and that filled the first 2 pandemic years. And I would say it took another nonfiction book to convince me that I don't care about nonfiction. I'm glad I wrote about the Sierras. I'm glad I wrote about Antarctica, which is the new book that's coming out, a nonfiction book with the same format as a Sierra book, but about Antarctica. History, geology, biographies, and my own memoir strand, all mixed together. There's some good stories in the history of Antarctica, and that's for sure. But for me, it's all about novels. And yet, and with 7 years away, which feels horrible to say that and stupid, I want to get back to it. I've covered every planet in the solar system in my fiction. That was the goal of my youth, and I finished it with Red Moon. And the moon, our moon, is so boring compared to everything else in the solar system. But I did my best. So now I'm thinking, I've done Antarctica now even twice. I've never written anything set in the Arctic. So my wife and I went to Svalbard last year, and I've been to Alaska this year, and we'll go again next week. I'm thinking of an Arctic novel, but then back to form. All my novels have been so long. Well, that's not true actually for my youth, but it's just definitely true since the Mars trilogy. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to go, I want to make them short. I want them to be like eyewitness accounts from Ministry for the Future and go very fast. And I'm thinking about detective stories. I'm thinking about speed, of thrillers, of the Arctic being oceanic rather than iced over. It will be very dangerous. So I have a lot of ideas, and I have even a start to it. And it will take a while because I'm very much consumed by Ministry for the Future business still. But I'm excited. I feel good. I'm back to fiction. I won't write any more nonfiction, except for the occasional mini essay. But, well, I shouldn't say, never say never. But in any case, it feels really good to be back to fiction.
Yeah, it also feels good for us. Okay, applause. So I think now we can turn a bit towards science and politics. So Barbara, you are especially interested in the role of scientific institutions, right? In the US, for example.
Yes, mainly because in your novel there's the National Science Foundation, which plays a huge role, of course. And I've been wondering while I was translating, sometimes I had to look at the websites of NSF or other organizations, and I could see how they changed since 2025. And I've been wondering if you, I'm sure you still have contacts among the scientific community of the NSF and other institutions. I've been wondering what you hear from them and how they look upon the future, what do they think their outlook is, and also if you think there's been permanent damage done already to the scientific community, especially with regard to climate research.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I've been very involved in it. As many of you might know, I'm married to a water chemist, a scientist for the U.S. Geological Survey. Before that, she worked for Food and Drug Administration, and before that, for the EPA. A federal scientist, I'm very proud of it as such. And there's books by Michael Lewis, the American journalist, a writer, about federal scientists and what they're like in the United States. The attack by the Trump administration has been quite horrible. I wouldn't say permanent damage, because nothing's permanent, but certainly a lot of really serious damage has been done that will be hard to repair. There will be, for every month of damage, there will be a year of repair work necessary, so it will go on for a long time. I'm friends with the guy who ran the National Science Foundation, who was a number two and a scientist rather than a political appointee. There was a long period of 2 or 3 years between political appointees, and he had to run it as the acting director during that time. This was heroic work. He aged in his appearance and perhaps in his spirit 10 or 20 years in those 3 years. Hard work. The stupidity and viciousness of the Trump administration cannot be exaggerated. They don't understand how the world works. Their own lives, their own comforts, and their own pleasures depend entirely upon the scientific method and the scientific enterprise. Their food, their toys, their necessities, they all come from science. So they're attacking the basis of their own existence. And attacking the National Institute of Health is an attack on life itself. So when I say the Trump administration is a death cult, I mean it literally. It's not just comparisons to Jim Jones and drink the Kool-Aid and everybody die. They are the Götterdämmerung. We're the gods. If we have to go down, we're taking everybody down with us. It's Wagner. It's the Norse myths. It's psychologically obvious that these are narcissists who are leading a death cult. And I used to, last year, to undergrad students, put it like this. NIH, every $1 billion of medical research expended extends the lifetime of all humans on Earth by about 1 month. And this is somewhat factitious. In other words, you can gather the statistics. In fact, Barbara's probably wondering if the numbers really work out here. And no, they don't, but they do. In this sense, we have all already experienced longevity treatments and life extension. And our average lifetimes for us now are much greater than for the generations of the past, precisely because of medical research and public health, which is also scientific in its basis. So when you cut NIH budget by $10 billion, then you have effectively erased 8 billion months of human life and consciousness in the most actuarial sense of, in other words, over years taken as an average. And that means 667 million years of human life has been erased by the Trump administration's attacks. Can this situation be repaired? Well, yes and no. That medical research isn't being paid for. It isn't happening. I should add quickly that the average age of federal scientists in the United States right now, only 10% of federal scientists are under the age of 30. So it's an aging population of scientists. And the younger people are saying, well, why should I go there when you're at the whim of an idiot? So people go into other federal service, federal science, which used to be a very respected kind of high esprit de corps, like a university, but run by the federal government to do public good. And that's been hammered, and it will take years and years to repair. So obviously I could go on about this because I care about it passionately, and here I am in the United States with a malignant fool for a president, and so many people enabling him and rushing to him as if they don't understand that they're going down in a hall of shame for associating with him and enabling him. I think probably you in Germany, being Germans, understand better how history judges and what a burden it can be on the people that follow. But these fools don't understand that. They don't have a historical sense. They don't know how science works. They don't know how the world works. They are living in a fantasy that is coming out of a death cult mentality.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think stupidity and viciousness is a very good description, I guess, for the current Trump administration. Bettina, you have also some questions, and it's also about science, but more about the science in the books, actually.
Yes, of course. Of course. It's about the protagonists you use. Many of the protagonists in your novels are scientists or people who have a scientific background. And normally, scientific work, thinking, documenting, analyzing, evaluating, is likely to seem rather boring to many people without a scientific background. How is it that scientists so often feature as heroes in your books, and how is the feedback of your other readers? My feedback is extremely positive because I like this.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Bettina. I am married to a scientist, and for those of you who are reading Green Earth, it probably comes as no great surprise to find out that Anna Quibbler, and the last name was very carefully chosen by me, with an email address, a Quibbler, which cracks me up, although my wife is less amused, but she sees the point. We are the Quibbler family, and I've not. It's not just her, although I have a deep love, but also a great admiration for the scientist as hero, as the chapter title in Green Mars, the scientist as hero. This work is anonymous, and it's teamwork, and so one does it out of a spirit of interest in how things work, an interest in nature, an interest in reality. To study it with the scientific method is a kind of religious attitude. It's a devotion to paying attention to the real and using math, like Galileo first pointed out, God speaks in mathematical equations. So I admire the scientists, and I myself am an English major only. I can understand what they say to me when they speak in English. I don't have the math to understand the technical aspects of their work. But I can write sentences that are suggestive enough that people can get it, perhaps, what the implications are. I don't know. But I like them as characters because they're so funny. This pretense of rationality, of objectivity, it's really Star Trek's Mr. Spock, who is the great public, popular image of the scientist, calm and rational on the exterior, but half Vulcan, half human, with a raging human emotional core underneath, driving this pretense of cool rationality. Spock is a great image for the scientist, and indeed not a bad portrait of my own wife. But they're all like that. And I would say that I wouldn't want to overgeneralize, but I would say that there are some scientists who are completely devoted to their subject and they won't talk about anything else. They're deep in their silo. They don't know much about anything else. And then there are scientists who are more polymaths. They are as culturally attuned as anyone else. They know politics, they know art, and then they know their science the way any of us knows our job or our area of expertise, but then as a general citizen. So I've portrayed scientists in both ways because there's a wide variety of character types and they can be funny. And because you're focusing here on Green Earth, I can say that Frank, I'm forgetting his last name. The Frank that's the Frank in Green Earth. There are many Franks in my book, as you may have noticed.
Barbara doesn't know it either, you know.
I can't remember at the moment either. Sorry.
It's all right. It's the same Frank. There have been some literary analyses saying this Frank is a very odd character, a mixed bag, very unusual character. I'm going to say no. Frank is absolutely typical of a certain kind of scientist who's also an athlete and a nature lover, and then a scientist as part of that, that because they love nature so much, they become scientists to study it more, and they have a vigorous and confusing emotional life. They have an athletic life. This is not at all uncommon. I would say Frank is actually a very realistic character for one kind of scientist. And there's many more. For those of you who read the Mars trilogy, for sure, Sax Russell, that's also a portrait of my wife, Sax. And I love it when people say how much they love Sax, because I do too. And yet there are other kinds of scientists in the Mars trilogy as well. What it does is it provides new characters that are not cliches out of the 19th century or out of the American bestseller novels, which are so repetitive and so bland and disconnected from larger historical forces and the modern world. I just feel like as a science fiction writer, you've become tapped into reality and the current scene. This is why I keep saying science fiction is the realism of our time. These scientists, indeed, they're anonymous and they're hard to characterize unless you watch them closely and live with them for 40 years. Not just my wife, but her whole community, like the community of scientists in Zurich that I hung out with for 2 years because she was doing her postdoc there. Then I associated with nothing but scientists from all over the world, but in particular Swiss scientists, which are, the pure product, you might say, or weirdly, Swissly. The Swiss, they are extremists, you might say. They're even more Germanic than Germans. It might be, whatever. But in any case, it gives you a range of characters that have a freshness to them. And as a novelist, with so many novels being published every year, to have this this pool of possibilities, new possibilities as a novelist, it's just a marvelous opportunity.
Thank you. I mean, I hope that, or I don't know if you can hear and see what's happening in the audience. I don't know what sound you hear, but there's a lot of positive reactions, and laughter. And just to give you like a bit of a glimpse of the atmosphere. You had a little follow-up question?
A comment on that you said science fiction is the realism of our time. We all lost a good friend quite a few years ago, Wolfgang Jeschke, who was the most important science fiction editor in Germany ever, who edited Heine for, 30 or 35 years. And the one sentence he kept repeating was that science fiction is the literature of the present and realism is the literature of the past, which I think is very close to what you're saying. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. I met Jeschke and had correspondence with him, as I suppose everybody in science fiction did, a major force in the world of science fiction. That's for sure.
And Bettina, you have another question regarding the protagonists in the books.
At first, thank you for mentioning Spock. I think he's one of the most important science communicators. And this is a serious literature science fiction con. Normally, I'm on other science fiction cons, and I am a Vulcan science officer and give then talks about astrobiology with pointed ears and so, but not here. This is serious. This is literature. Yeah, and I have another question for your protagonists. You have some very unusual persons in your novels. The Feng Shui expert Ta Shu, who shares stories of places and atmospheres from his travels through Antarctica and through other landscapes. That's somebody who is really interesting. And then you have the extreme mountaineer Val, also in Antarctica, and her admiring for the landscape around her, how she feels it, how she lives it. And the airship pilot and nature influencer Amelia in New York 2140. They are highly unusual characters for sci-fi and climate fiction scenarios. What was your intention to create them?
Well, thank you for that. I love all three of those characters very much. And I'm going to say, look, a novelist is a novelist is a novelist. And novels, we all know what they are. What are they? They are characters and plot. Those are the two most important things. Then you might get setting and you might get various derivative effects like theme or style, blah, blah. But you can reduce it to characters in a plot. And so you need characters. And so if you have an initial situation, let's write about Antarctica and really try to tell the stories of the mostly British adventurers that went down there in a century ago, the heroic era of Antarctic exploration. What if it was a Chinese Feng Shui expert and poet, and a poet who wrote long poems and came down to Antarctica and found that the place made him go mute, that there was nothing could be said. And this was my own response, really. What if that Feng Shui expert was retelling the old British stories that these British explorers who couldn't explain themselves or to us, they're very inarticulate on their motives. What if they were geomancers and they didn't know it? So Ta Shu, I was so fond of him, and he really made the Antarctic novel come alive. I think he was my best way into it, and maybe the key to the rest of the novel working. I actually brought him back, which I rarely have done in my novels, but he is the protagonist of Red Moon, which was a lot of fun to send Ta Shu to the moon, which is even worse than Antarctica in terms of being alien. That was fun. And then I got to write more of his poems and more of his life, going back home to Beijing to bury his mother. These kind of things were a gift to me from the novels. And then Val, she's extraordinarily tall, but other than that, she's completely characteristic. There are a lot of women who they get to Antarctica and they can say goodbye to the stupidity of American consumer attitudes towards women. They can dodge that and become a human like anyone else out in Antarctica, become mountaineers, live an active physical life, and also a very active romantic life, of course, like anybody would. But in Antarctica, a lot of crap is stripped away, and you're reduced to a kind of essence that is more real. There's a heightened reality, and it's more fun. So Val, I love dearly, and I put the women that I met in Antarctica in 1995, several of their stories are stranded into Val's stories, and the women who told me their stories are quite pleased to have their stories represented through Val. And then, wait, who was the third one?
Amelia.
Amelia Earhart, Amelia Airhead. Well, she's caught. See, this is sort of she's kind of like Marilyn Monroe, extremely attractive in a conventional way and trapped in as a media star. And there's something that happened in Amelia's past that I decided that I would never explain, and I don't even know for sure what it was itself, that made her want to reject all that and even all of humanity. So she lives in an airship as much as she can. And she comes across as simple, like Marilyn Monroe perhaps, but it's a bit of an act. The woman who read Amelia's chapters in the audiobook of New York 2140 caught her perfectly. It's better in the audio than it is on the page, which I would rarely say. But somehow she understood what Amelia was supposed to sound like. And that made that I found beautiful. And the fact that she's the one that actually starts the revolution. She sees it from above. She knows what's right. She hates her the media role imposed upon her. She rebels against it, and she accidentally kicks off the little mini revolution. Not accidentally. She just says, "Look, folks, this has to change right now. I'm calling time for the revolution to start," which was a general strike, in effect, a fiscal strike. That I enjoyed greatly. This was a way of talking about you can, if you look a certain way in America as a woman, you will be underestimated automatically. And then you have to deal. And so I'm very impressed. And really, the younger they are, the more opportunities they've had to learn from previous feminisms. So there has been 3 waves of feminism, really strong historically, but it never really ends. It's just additive each to the next. So these days, you know, I'm grandfather age to many a young woman that I'm very impressed by in the way that they're operating as political actors in the real world. It's wonderful to see.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
And yeah, also a question which is more political, but also maybe connected to the one before about yeah, unusual characters or charismatic characters or protagonists. Hannes, you have also a quite.
Thank you. Yes, but before I do that, I want to just for you all just to give one big thought to someone who cannot be here, which is Stan and my friend Fritz Heidorn, who wanted to come and cannot be here with us. He's the guy whose persistency made the book Grüne Erde happen in Germany. He's at home taking care of someone very important in his life. His persistence and his financial help made the German Grüne Erde book happen. And I hope he's sitting at home and listening to this. And I want you all to give a big hand to Fritz for this.
Thank you,
The
Hannes.
questions I had was, we Germans are all looking at the US politics with prejudices, with disbelief, with what's happening there. And there's one guy who gives some of us hope, which is the mayor of New York, who happens to be a Muslim and a left-wing politician. And he's kind of starting something there because he's not alone anymore in his political, in being politically successful. And he's my one thing that I think, okay, there may be some change there, because for me, the Democrats are as corrupt as the Republicans. They just cover it up better. And do you think that this might be a chance that something starts from Mamdani for the US, or is this just one big fire and someone will shoot him next year and that's it?
Well, it's impossible to say. The future is impossible to predict what will happen. There's flows back and forth, and it seems like there are pendulum swings in American politics where if it goes too far one direction, then it swings back in the other direction. And the young, if they feel angry enough and empowered enough or in peril, endangered, then sometimes they can act in ways that create a social wave. I myself come from the 60s and the 70s, the anti-Vietnam War movement, and then the changes that happened in civil rights. It looked so hopeful for a while, but then neoliberalism slammed the door in our faces. A complete surprise. 1980, I can say, was a complete surprise to me politically. So who can say what will happen next? It's very volatile. But the badness of the Trump administration may represent a kind of an end point and a revulsion against him from different quarters, including some of his supporters, like Christians, such that he will be too ugly to and morally ugly to support anymore, and it could be there will swing back. Say that I'm a member of the Democratic Party, and that you have to understand the Democratic Party as not corrupt, but just Clintonized in the sense of trying to please everybody, nowhere near as corrupt as the Republican Party or as horrible in their political views of supporting the rich only. So neoliberalism has been bad for the whole world, and the first step back from it is maybe just Keynesian, normal, FDR democratic politics, but this would be Keynesian in its economics, and then social democracy. So I think Mamdani represents an American version of social democracy coming back. That immediately gets tagged as socialism, if not communism, by people who oppose it. But the more you understand, the more you realize that social democracy in the United States, to the extent it exists, is very, very weak. There's not a safety net for people who are impoverished, and there is not a cap on wealth at the top. So we need progressive taxation. We need better social safety net programs. Both of these are legislative, and both of these are Democratic Party programs, not Republican Party programs, which wants to cut government to non-existence, not understanding that government is crucial. So that's my take on it. I'm also a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. I love these young people. It's a rather small, well, there's 70,000 of them, but there should be 7 million of them or 70 million of them. And because it is a fringe group, I think 20th century names and even 19th century names are maybe not appropriate for what we have to do. And if you want to be effective, everybody on the left needs to be under a big tent of support for each other. We need the moderates to convince the backwoods of America to go along with ordinary democratic politics. We need the radicals and the progressives to push the program to make it more national and make it more sustainable over the long haul, make it more real. So I would love to see, like in 28, there will be an election here, and I would love to see a presidential candidate that appeals broadly to everybody. Someone like the governor of Kentucky, for instance, with AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We just call her AOC because of that. AOC is maybe the vice presidential candidate to rally the progressives on the far left to join the team and make it one team. Because the important thing is a working political majority. And we are not in a parliamentary system like yours. And of course, you all know this, so I won't go on. But we can't vote for the people we really want and then make a parliamentary majority by way of alliances between smaller parties. It's impossible in the United States. We only have the two parties. A third party has no chance and is just wrecking the party on its own side. So you have to rally the Democratic Party to become a big tent that wins a political majority, and then the left of the Democratic Party has to pull the moderates of the Democratic Party further leftwards to make it more real. So that's my political project.
Okay, thank you. So we have 5 minutes left. Yeah, that was the sign. So I think that means one question from the audience. Who wants to ask a question? Thanks.
Come on, guys.
There's one.
Thank you. While Mystery of the Future can be regarded as utopian, much of the change in the novel stemmed from basically acts of terrorism, like the bombs on airplanes or on pipelines. Do you think we can enact positive change without these, or is it not going to happen?
Thank you for that. And I can say that over the 7 years since Ministry for the Future came out, or maybe it's 6 years, it feels like 20. I've been asked that question a lot. I'm going to say I'm a pacifist, and I believe in nonviolent resistance. And what Ministry for the Future does not do that it should have done is make a stronger distinction between murder and sabotage, in effect. So never hurt people in any way, shape, or form, bodily. Go ahead and wreck a pipeline if you want to. This is Malm, how to blow up a pipeline. His distinction there is I think extremely important. But his book came out after mine did. I had no knowledge of his work until after I wrote Ministry. I could write a couple more chapters of Ministry to clarify this, and I wish I had the opportunity. I won't take it. But I think the novel is murky and confused in the way that reality is murky and confused, so I don't feel too bad about it. It works as a novel. And I'll say that even in the book, it's the carbon coin, it's central banks that actually make the fundamental changes that help this situation in Ministry. And it's not clear that bombing the private airliners does anything at all to help the larger situation. I thought it was possible. I thought the future was going to be messy and violent, that there were going to be people extremely angry and commit murder. And so when I was portraying it, I was trying to give a realistic sense that when Ministry comes to a positive end, like 30 years later, that it is a kind of utopian novel, that the bar for utopia has been set very low these days. If we get through this century without a mass extinction event, that's a utopian story. But I wanted people reading it to feel that it was realistic at every point of the way, including that it was messy, that there was no plan, that there was lots of violence that was counterproductive and even bad morally. There should be a chapter in Ministry where some mother with her daughter next to her is going down in one of those planes, one of the eyewitness accounts, first person. That should be in there to make this point clearer. And so I've had to do a lot of explaining, and I don't renounce Ministry in any way, shape, or form. I think it did its job and did its job well. But that point could have been more clear, and the novel would have been even better. But so it goes.
I like that. It could have been even better. Great. So yeah, we're really heading towards the end. I think it's a really pointed landing. Do you say that in English? So thank again. You want to add something?
I do. Yes, thank you for reminding me. I will be in Berlin next June, like about almost exactly a year from now. I just wanted to tell people that because I'm rarely there. I strongly remember when I was there, Hannes was my host. I did a signing at the bookstore there next to Checkpoint Charlie and then had a long, it turned out I was deathly ill at the time, but I didn't know it. And so that night went on very long, but it was very warm, intelligent, and moving conversation with a crowd, may even have included some of you out there now, but it was indeed the German science fiction crowd. And when I go next year, it will be for Johann Rockstrom and the Potsdam Institute for Climatology. They're having some kind of a climate meeting that will be in Berlin and Potsdam next June, and I've agreed to come over. I will only be there a couple days, but I just thought I'd mention it now because it'd be fun to see people in person and not do it through this kind of mediation.
Great.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, we will make it happen.
That would be great.
Yeah, good. Okay, and with that, I should say goodbye.
So yeah, we put it on our agenda. Thank you again, and bye from Berlin to California. Bye, then. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have fun in Berlin. Have a good evening.